There are moments when you realize you have hit rock bottom, yet you never imagined the bottom could be this deep. I lost my husband in a cold divorce and my father with just one sentence. Then, when I thought I could not lose anything else, the homeless boy I took in whispered that his dad is a billionaire. Standing in my shoes, would you believe him? Or would you think it was just the final lie of a broken child? My name is Lila Vance, and at 32 years old, I signed away the last decade of my life with a ballpoint pen that was running out of ink. The lawyer across the mahogany desk looked bored, checking his watch as if my tragedy were merely holding up his lunch break. I pressed down harder, scratching my signature into the paper until the cheap plastic barrel of the pen cracked under my grip. It was done. The divorce was final. I walked out of that office into the gray afternoon light of Seattle feeling lighter. But not in the way a balloon feels light. I felt light like a hollow shell, something that could be crushed by the slightest pressure. My ex-husband, Mark, had already left through the back exit. He could not even look at me. He had gotten the house, the savings, and the social standing. I had gotten my freedom, which at that moment felt terrifyingly like nothingness. I drove my beat-up sedan toward the suburbs, toward the only safety net I had left. My parents lived in a pristine two-story colonial in a neighborhood where the lawns were manicured to within a millimeter of their lives. I told myself that they would be angry about the divorce. Certainly. They were people who cared deeply about appearances, and a failed marriage was a crack in the porcelain facade of the family reputation. But I also told myself that they were my parents. Surely, when they saw their daughter broken and bleeding emotionally, the instinct to protect would override the instinct to judge. I was wrong. When I pulled into the driveway, the rain had just started to fall. A slow, miserable drizzle that coated the windshield in a greasy film. I took a deep breath, grabbed my single duffel bag from the passenger seat, and opened the back door. "Come on, Leo," I said softly. The boy uncurled himself from the back seat. He was small for his age, perhaps 7 or 8, though we did not know for sure. His clothes were clean now, thanks to me, but he still wore them like armor, hunching his shoulders as if expecting a blow. He had large, dark eyes that took in everything and gave away nothing. He clutched a worn backpack to his chest, the only possession he refused to let go of. "Are we staying here?" he asked, his voice barely a scratch in the silence. "Just for a little while," I promised, "just until I get back on my feet." I led him to the front porch. I did not use my key. It felt presumptuous now that I was a failure of a daughter. I rang the bell. My mother opened the door. She was wearing a pearl necklace and a cashmere cardigan, looking ready for a bridge club meeting. Her eyes went to my face, then down to my bag, and finally, they landed on Leo. Her expression hardened instantly. It was not hatred, exactly. It was something worse. It was disgust. "Elara," she said. She did not step back to let us in. "Mom, can we come in?" I asked, and I hated how my voice trembled. "It is raining." She hesitated, then stepped aside, but her body language remained rigid. We stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and potpourri, the scent of my childhood, yet it felt entirely alien. "Is he here?" I asked, meaning my father. "In the study," she said. "He knows." I left Leo in the hallway, instructing him to sit on the bench and not move. He obeyed instantly, making himself as small as possible. I walked to the study door, knocked once, and entered. My father was standing by the window, looking out at the rain. He did not turn around when I entered. The room was lined with books he had never read, and awards he had bought tables at charity galas to receive. "The papers are signed," I said. "I assumed as much," he replied. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of warmth. He finally turned. His face was a mask of cold fury. "You have lost the house." "Mark bought me out for a fraction of its value," I explained, trying to keep my composure. "I used that money to pay off the debts he left in my name. I have nothing left, Dad." "You have nothing left because you chose to throw it away," he snapped. He walked over to his desk and leaned against it, crossing his arms. "Mark was a good man, a successful man. He provided for you. He gave you a life most women would kill for. He was cold and controlling, I countered, and he wanted me to abandon a child. My father's face turned a shade of red I remembered from my teenage years. He pointed a finger at the door. That is not a child. Ilara, that is a stray animal you picked up off the street. You ruined your marriage for a homeless brat who has no business in our world. His name is Leo, I said, my voice rising. And he had nowhere else to go. I could not just leave him there. So you brought him into your home, my father said, shaking his head in disbelief. You let a street rat sleep in the guest room. You spent our money feeding him, clothing him. You embarrassed Mark. You embarrassed us. Do you know what people are whispering at the club? They are saying my daughter has lost her mind. They are saying she prefers the company of beggars to her own husband. I do not care what people at the club say, I said, though the stinging in my eyes betrayed me. I came here because I need help. I need a place to stay for a few weeks, just until I can find a job in an apartment. My father laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Here? You think you can bring him here? He is a good kid. Dad, he is quiet. You will not even know he is here. I will know, he spat. I can smell the gutter on him from here. My mother appeared in the doorway behind me. I turned to her, looking for an ally. Mom, please, just for a few nights. She looked at the floor. You made your choice. Ilara, we warned you. We told you that if you kept that boy, Mark would leave. We told you to call social services and be done with it. You thought you knew better. He needed me, I whispered. And now you need us, my father said. But that is the thing about choices, Ilara. You have to live with them. He stood up straight and buttoned his suit jacket, as if concluding a business meeting. You are not staying here. The air left my lungs. What? I will not have that boy under my roof, and I will not have a daughter who disrespects this family so profoundly. You are a disgrace, Ilara. You have humiliated us for the last time. Dad, you cannot be serious, I said, panic finally setting in. I have nowhere else to go. My bank account is empty. I have $20 in my pocket. Then perhaps you should have thought about that before you decided to play Mother Teresa to a vagrant, he said. Get out. It is raining, I pleaded. It is pouring outside. At least let us stay until morning. I said get out, his voice boomed, shaking the frames on the walls. I looked at my mother. She was still studying the pattern on the rug. She would not save me. In this house, my father's word was law, and his love was a currency I had just run out of. I turned around and walked out of the study. My legs felt like lead. In the hallway. Leo was sitting exactly where I had left him. He looked up at me, and I saw the terror in his eyes. He had heard the shouting. He knew. Come on, Leo, I said, choking back a sob. Are they mad at me? He asked in a small voice. No, I lied. No, honey, we just have to go. I grabbed his hand. It was cold. We walked to the front door. My father did not follow us, but I could feel his gaze burning into my back. My mother stood in the hallway, watching us leave like a ghost haunting her own home. I opened the heavy oak door and the sound of the rain filled the silence. It was coming down hard now, a relentless deluge that blurred the world into gray smears. We stepped out onto the porch. Give me your key, my father called out from the darkness of the hallway. I stopped. I reached into my pocket, pulled out the brass key I had carried since I was 16 years old, and placed it on the porch railing. I did not look back. We walked down the driveway. The rain soaked through my thin blouse in seconds. The water was freezing, biting into my skin. Leo shivered against me. I pulled him close, trying to shield him with my body, but it was useless. We were exposed. We reached the sidewalk. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long, distorted shadows on the wet pavement. I looked at my car parked on the street. It was old, and the heater was broken, but it was dry. Then I remembered. The transmission had been slipping for weeks. I did not have enough gas to make it to the city. and I did not have the money to fill the tank. I looked at the house one last time. The lights in the windows were warm and golden, shutting us out. It looked like a picture on a greeting card, a lie of happiness and family. My father had said I was ruining my life. Standing there in the rain, with my clothes clinging to my body and my hair plastered to my skull. It certainly felt like he was right. I had lost my marriage. I had lost my inheritance. I had lost my parents. I looked down at Leo. He was looking up at me, water dripping from his nose. He did not cry. He did not complain. He just waited to see what I would do. I realized then that I was the only thing standing between him and the abyss. If I fell, he fell, and I refused to let him fall. I gripped his hand tighter. "It is okay," I said, though the words were lost in the sound of the wind. "We will figure this out." I turned away from the house, away from the life I had known for 32 years. Ahead of us lay the road, dark and winding, leading into a night that promised nothing but cold. I had no plan. I had no resources. But as we began to walk into the darkness, I felt a strange, jagged resolve hardening in my chest. They had thrown me away. They thought I would break. They thought I would come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, ready to abandon the boy to regain my comfort. They were wrong. We walked into the night, two shadows against the storm, starting a journey where the only destination was survival, as the icy rain of the present washed away the last remnants of my old life. My mind drifted back to a different kind of cold. It was the sterile, recirculated air of the Seattle General Hospital emergency room waiting area. Exactly 7 months ago, that was where this timeline really began. Not with a signed divorce paper or a slammed door, but with a silence that was louder than a scream. I had been there for a migraine that had blinded me in my left eye, a physical manifestation of the stress fracturing my marriage. The room was a chaotic symphony of human misery. A baby was wailing in the corner. A man was coughing a wet, hacking cough that made everyone shift in their plastic chairs. And the television mounted on the wall was blaring a local news report about traffic jams on Interstate 5. Amidst this cacophony, there was a void. He was sitting 3 rows ahead of me, tucked into the far corner near a vending machine that hummed with an irritating buzz. He looked smaller then, if that was even possible. He was wearing a gray hoodie that was at least 2 sizes too big. The cuffs swallowed his hands completely, and jeans that were frayed at the hems. Dirt was smudged across his cheekbone, not the fresh dirt of a boy playing in a park, but the old, ingrained grime of someone who had stopped trying to wash it off. What caught my attention was not his appearance, but his stillness. In a room full of people shifting, pacing, checking phones, and groaning, this child was a statue. He was not swinging his legs. He was not looking around with curiosity. He was staring at a spot on the linoleum floor with an intensity that was unnerving. I watched him for 20 minutes. My headache was throbbing behind my temple, a rhythmic drumbeat of pain, but I could not take my eyes off him. I kept waiting for a parent to return from the restroom or the intake desk. I waited for a mother to rush over with a cup of water or a father to tell him to sit up straight. 10 minutes passed, then 20. No one came. He was invisible. Nurses walked past him with clipboards, their eyes gliding over him as if he were part of the furniture. A security guard leaned against the wall 6 feet away, scrolling through his phone, completely oblivious to the unaccompanied minor sitting in his jurisdiction. It was a terrifying magic trick. The boy had mastered the art of being unseen because being seen usually meant trouble. I saw a triage nurse finally look up from her desk. Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the room. Landing on the boy, I saw the calculation in her face. He was not a patient. He was loitering. He was a complication. She signaled to the security guard, pointing a pen in the boy's direction. The guard sighed, put his phone away, and pushed himself off the wall. He was a large man, his uniform straining at the buttons. He walked toward the corner with the heavy, purposeful steps of someone used to clearing out refuse. I felt a sudden, sharp spike of adrenaline that had nothing to do with my migraine. The guard stopped in front of the boy. The child did not flinch. but I saw his shoulders tense up, rising toward his ears. He did not look up. "Hey, kid," the guard said, his voice booming slightly in the crowded room. "Where are your parents?" The boy remained silent. He kept his gaze fixed on the floor. "I am talking to you," the guard said, louder this time. He reached out and tapped the boy's shoulder. "You cannot sleep here. This is for patients only. Who are you here with?" The boy finally looked up. From where I was sitting, I could see his profile. Then, as if sensing the weight of my attention, he turned his head slightly. Our eyes met across the rows of blue plastic chairs. It was not a look of fear. It was not the look of a child who had lost his mother in a grocery store. It was an ancient, hollow look. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and utterly devoid of hope. They were the eyes of someone who had done the math of his own existence and realized the numbers did not add up. He looked at the guard, then back at me. It was a fleeting connection, lasting perhaps 2 seconds, but it hit me with the force of a physical blow. In that look, he was not asking for help. He was acknowledging a shared reality, that the world was cold, and we were just biological matter occupying space. "I shouldn't be here," he said. His voice was soft, barely audible over the din of the waiting room, but the clarity of his diction surprised me. He did not slur or mumble. He spoke with a strange, formal precision. "I shouldn't be here." It was such a peculiar thing to say. Most kids would say, "I want my mom," or "I am hungry." But he spoke as if his presence in this specific coordinate of space and time was a cosmic error. The guard was losing patience. He grabbed the boy's arm, not roughly, but with firm authority. "All right, let us go. We are going to call child services. We will find out where you belong." The mention of child services acted like an electric shock. The boy did not struggle, but his face went pale. I saw his free hand tremble. Just once. He knew what that meant. He knew the system. I did not think. I did not weigh the pros and cons. I did not consider what Mark would say when I came home late. I did not think about the legal ramifications or the sheer insanity of intervening in a situation that had nothing to do with me. I stood up. My purse slid off my lap and hit the floor, spilling a tube of lipstick and a roll of mints. But I ignored it. I walked across the room, my heels clicking sharply on the tile. "Officer," I said, my voice ringing out with a confidence I did not feel. The guard turned, still holding the boy's arm. "Ma'am, you need to take a seat. We will call your name when a bed is open." "He is with me," I lied. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. The guard blinked, looking from me to the boy. I was dressed in a tailored blazer and designer slacks, my hair blow-dried to perfection despite the headache. The boy was in rags. We looked as much alike as a diamond and a piece of coal. "He is with you?" the guard asked skeptically. "He has been sitting here alone for 2 hours. "I was in the restroom," I said smoothly, stepping between the guard and the child. I placed my hand on the boy's other shoulder. Under the thick fabric of the hoodie, I could feel how thin he was. He felt fragile, like a bird made of hollow bones. "He is waiting for me. We are leaving now. My headache is better, and the wait time is ridiculous." I looked down at the boy. I expected him to pull away, to expose my lie, to look confused, but he did not. He looked up at me with those dark, unreadable eyes, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something that looked like disbelief. He did not speak. He simply leaned a fraction of an inch into my touch. The guard looked at us, his eyes narrowing as he tried to find the cracks in my story, but the disparity in our appearance, while suspicious, was not a crime. And more importantly, he did not want to fill out the paperwork required for an abandoned minor. He wanted an easy shift. "Keep a better eye on him," the guard grumbled, releasing the boy's arm. "He cannot be wandering around disturbing patients." "I will," I said. "Come on, Leo." I did not know why I chose that name. It just fell out of my mouth. Maybe because he had a mane of messy hair, or maybe because he had the quiet dignity of a lion in a cage. I steered him toward the exit. I did not look back at the nurse or the guard. I kept my hand on his shoulder, terrified that if I let go, he would vanish into smoke. We walked through the automatic sliding doors and into the cool evening air. We stopped on the sidewalk outside the ambulance bay. The city sounds rushed back in. Sirens, honking cars, distant chatter. I took my hand off his shoulder. I suddenly felt awkward, the adrenaline fading to reveal the absurdity of what I had just done. I had essentially kidnapped a child, or at least claimed possession of one that did not belong to me. "You did not have to do that," he said. He was looking at his sneakers again. "I know," I replied. "Where are your parents?" "Gone." "Gone where? Home?" "Just gone," he said. He looked up at me then. "Why did you say my name was Leo?" "You looked like a Leo," I said. "What is your real name?" He hesitated. He looked at the bustling street, then back at the hospital doors, then finally at me. He seemed to be weighing the risk of truth against the safety of silence. "It does not matter," he said. "I do not have a name anymore." My heart broke a little right then. A child without a name was a tragedy I was not equipped to handle. "Well," I said, clutching my purse strap, "I cannot leave you here. Are you hungry?" He nodded, a small, jerky movement. "Okay, I'm going to get my car. We will get some food, and then we will figure it out." I did not know what "figure it out" meant. I assumed I would buy him a burger, drive him to a shelter, or maybe the police station if I could find a kind officer. I did not know that by opening my car door for him, I was closing the door on my marriage. I did not know that bringing him home would be the catalyst that stripped me of my family, my wealth, and my reputation. All I knew was that when he looked at me in that waiting room, I saw a reflection of my own loneliness. I was a woman surrounded by people but known by no one. He was a boy seen by no one, but surrounded by the world. We were two mismatched pieces of wreckage floating in the same ocean. "Come on," I said, gesturing to the parking garage. "My car is this way." He took a step toward me, then stopped. "You will get in trouble," he warned me. "People get in trouble when they help me." "I am not afraid of trouble," I said. Another lie. I was terrified of everything. I was afraid of my husband's temper, my father's judgment, and my own inadequacy. But looking at him, shivering slightly in the evening breeze, I found a different kind of fear. The fear of being the kind of person who walked away. "Let us go, Leo," I said firmly. He followed me, and just like that, without a single document signed or a drop of blood shared, we became a unit. It was a silent pact made on a concrete sidewalk, forged in the fires of mutual isolation. I saved him from the system that night, and in a way, I was only beginning to understand now as we walked through the rain away from my parents' house. He had saved me from becoming a monster. The weeks that followed my departure from my parents' house were a blur of neon signs and the smell of industrial bleach. We did not find an apartment, without a credit history in my own name, since everything had been joint with Mark, and with no proof of income. We were radioactive to landlords. Instead, we found the Emerald Inn, a roadside motel on the frayed edge of the city, where the no vacancy sign flickered with a desperate, buzzing, intermittent hum. The room cost $280 a week. It had a carpet that felt sticky even when dry and walls so thin we could hear the man in room 12 coughing his way through the night. But it had a door that locked and a radiator that rattled out enough heat to keep the damp Seattle chill at bay. For the first time in my life, I learned what it meant to labor for survival. I took a job at a 24-hour diner 3 miles down the road. It was a place where truck drivers and insomniacs came to eat eggs that tasted like grease and drink coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. I worked the graveyard shift, from 11 at night until 7 in the morning, because it paid an extra $1 an hour. My hands, once manicured and soft, became rough and red. I burned my thumb on a hot plate on my 3rd night. I broke a nail lifting a crate of frozen fries and just filed the rest down to the quick. My back ached with a dull, throbbing persistence that never truly went away. But every morning, when I walked back to the motel with $40 or $50 in tips crumpled in my pocket, I felt a strange, fierce pride. Leo became my anchor. During the day, while I tried to sleep in short, fitful bursts. He would sit at the small, scarred table by the window. He did not watch cartoons, even though the room had a television. He drew. I had bought him a sketchbook and a pack of charcoal pencils from a drugstore with my first tips. He drew everything. He drew the pigeons that fought over crumbs in the parking lot. He drew the jagged skyline of the city that had rejected us. He drew me, sleeping with my arm thrown over my eyes. He was quiet, but it was no longer the silence of the void I had seen in the hospital. It was a comfortable, companionable silence. He began to trust that I would wake up. He began to trust that I would come back when I left for work. One evening, before I left for my shift, we were eating instant mac and cheese out of styrofoam cups. It was raining again, a soft drumming against the window pane. "You look tired, Ilara," he said. He had started calling me by my name a week ago. It sounded serious and adult coming from his small mouth. "I am okay," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a long night ahead." He put his plastic fork down and looked at me with those intense, dark eyes. "I used to be invisible," he said. I stopped eating. The air in the room seemed to shift. "What do you mean, Leo?" "Before," he said, gesturing vaguely to the world outside our door. "When I was on the street, or in the shelters, people would look right through me, like I was a window, or a ghost. Even if I was standing right in front of them, they did not see me. They saw a problem, or they saw nothing." He picked up his fork again and poked at his pasta. "But you see me, you look at me, and you actually see me." I reached across the small table and covered his hand with mine. His skin was warm. "I will always see you, Leo. You are the most real thing in the world to me. That is why I stay," he whispered, "because I am real here." That conversation stayed with me through every hour of my shift that night. It played on a loop in my head while I wiped down sticky tables and refilled ketchup bottles. We were a family. It was a jagged, broken, makeshift family constructed from the debris of two shattered lives. But it was real. We were two people who had been discarded by the world, clinging to each other to prove that we existed. But love, I quickly learned, is not a currency you can use to pay the rent. The pressure began to mount in the fourth week. My car, which had been on its last legs when we left my parents' house, finally gave up the ghost. The transmission seized with a violent shudder 2 blocks from the motel. I sold it to a scrapyard for $300. It felt like selling a limb, but we needed the money for food. Without the car, my world shrank. I had to walk to the diner, adding 40 minutes to my commute each way. The rainy season was in full swing, and I would arrive at work soaked to the bone, my uniform clinging to me, shivering under the fluorescent lights until the heat of the kitchen dried me out. Then came the sickness. Leo woke up one Tuesday burning with fever. His small body shook, and his teeth chattered even under the 3 thin blankets I piled on him. I called in sick to the diner. The manager, a man named Rick, who had grease under his fingernails and no sympathy in his heart, told me if I did not show up, I did not need to come back. I hung up the phone. I sat by Leo's bed, dipping a washcloth in cool water and pressing it to his forehead. I watched the rise and fall of his chest, terrified by the rattling sound in his lungs. I did not have health insurance. I did not have money for a doctor. I went to the pharmacy and bought the strongest over-the-counter medicine I could afford, counting out the coins on the counter while the cashier looked at me with pity that felt like acid. Leo recovered after 3 days, but the damage was done. I had lost my job. The $300 from the car was gone. The last of my tips were dwindling. I spent the next week frantically applying for anything within walking distance. I washed dishes at a bakery. I handed out flyers for a tax preparation service in the pouring rain. I cleaned the bathroom of a gas station for $20 cash under the table. Every dollar was a battle. I started skipping meals so Leo could eat properly. I told him I had eaten at work, even when I had not worked a shift in 2 days. I grew thinner. My cheekbones became sharp ridges under my skin, and the circles under my eyes darkened to the color of bruises. The anxiety was a physical weight, a stone sitting in my stomach that made it hard to breathe. I would lie awake at night, listening to the traffic on the highway, doing mental arithmetic that never added up. 280 for rent, 30 for food, 0 for emergencies, negative numbers. We were slipping. I could feel the edge of the cliff crumbling under my heels. One afternoon, I came back to the motel after a humiliating rejection from a retail store. The manager had taken one look at my wet clothes and exhausted face and told me the position had been filled. I found Leo sitting on the bed, his knees pulled up to his chest. The motel manager, a man who smelled of stale tobacco and suspicion, was standing in the open doorway. "Rent was due yesterday," he barked, not even looking at Leo. He was staring at me, his eyes tracking the mud on my shoes. "I know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I get paid tomorrow. I will have it for you by noon." "You said that last week," he spat. "I am running a business, not a charity ward. You are short $70 from last week, plus the new week. That is $350. "I will get it," I promised, desperation creeping into my tone. "Please, just give me 24 hours. He looked at me, then at the room. He saw the sketches taped to the wall, Leo's drawings of birds and buildings. He saw the meager pile of clothes in the corner. For a second, I thought I saw a flicker of humanity. "Tomorrow noon," he said. "If you do not have the cash, the locks get changed, and I keep your stuff as collateral." He slammed the door. The sound echoed in the small room like a gunshot. I leaned against the doorframe, my legs shaking so hard I thought I would collapse. I had $11 in my pocket. There was no paycheck coming tomorrow. There was nothing coming. Leo slid off the bed and walked over to me. He wrapped his arms around my waist and buried his face in my stomach. He did not say anything. He did not ask if we were going to be okay. He knew better than to ask questions that had no answers. I stroked his hair, which was getting long and curling at the ends. I looked around the room, this damp, ugly, cramped box that had become our sanctuary. It was the only thing standing between us and the street, and I had failed to keep it. "I am sorry," I whispered into the silence. Leo looked up. His eyes were dry, but they held a terrifying understanding. "It is not your fault, Ilara. The world is just big, and we are small." His words chilled me. He was right. We were small. We were insignificant specks in a system designed to grind us down. But as I looked at him, I felt a surge of something darker than despair. It was anger. I had done everything right. I had followed the rules. I had been a good wife, a good daughter, a good citizen. And the moment I showed a shred of humanity, the moment I chose love over status, the world had decided to crush me. That night, we ate the last of the bread and peanut butter. I packed our bags. I did not tell Leo why, but he helped me fold his few shirts and stack his drawings carefully in his backpack. We both knew. We were preparing for the fall. I lay in bed that night, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a weeping eye. I held Leo's hand across the gap between the two twin beds. "Ilara," he whispered in the dark. "Yes, Leo?" "If we have to go," he paused, searching for the words. "If we have to go, can we stay together?" Tears finally leaked from my eyes, hot and stinging, sliding into my ears. "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, Leo, no matter what, we stay together." "Okay," he said, his voice relaxing. "Then I am not scared." I squeezed his hand until my knuckles turned white. He was not scared because he had me, but I was terrified. I was terrified because I knew what was waiting outside that door. I knew that tomorrow, the thin veneer of stability we had built would be ripped away, and we would be truly, completely alone. The wind howled outside, rattling the window in its frame. It sounded like a warning. The storm was not over. It was just beginning. The sound of the door locking behind us was final. It was a mechanical click, a heavy thud of the deadbolt sliding home, and then silence. I stood in the parking lot of the Emerald Inn, staring at the number 12 painted on the peeling blue wood. Beside me, Leo adjusted the straps of his backpack. He did not look back. He knew better than I did that once a door closes in this life, it rarely opens again. It was noon on a Wednesday. The sky was a flat, oppressive sheet of gray slate. We had exactly $4.27 between us. We walked to the edge of the motel property and stood on the sidewalk. To the left was the highway leading back to the city center. To the right was the suburban sprawl where I had grown up, a place that was now as inaccessible to me as the moon. "Which way?" Leo asked. "Downtown," I said. My voice sounded thin, stripped of the authority I used to carry so easily. "There are more places to go." We walked for 3 hours. The physical act of walking with everything you own on your back is a specific kind of torture. It is not just the weight. It is the visibility. I felt exposed. Cars rushed past us, drivers safe in their climate-controlled bubbles, listening to podcasts and thinking about dinner. They looked at us, two figures trudging along the shoulder of the road, and I saw their eyes slide away. We were becoming part of the background scenery, indistinguishable from the trash and the telephone poles. By the time we reached the city limits, my feet were blistered inside my boots. We found a public library, a brick fortress that smelled of old paper and damp wool. It was a sanctuary. We went to the 3rd floor, hidden behind rows of reference books that nobody touched anymore. I went to the bathroom to wash my face. I looked in the mirror and flinched. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. My hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun, greasy at the roots. My skin was pale and dry. But it was my eyes that scared me. They looked feral. They were constantly darting, scanning, assessing threats. When I came back, Leo was reading a book about sharks. He looked up and smiled, a small, tentative thing. "Great whites never stop swimming," he whispered. "If they stop, they sink." "Then we will keep swimming," I said. But swimming requires energy, and we were running on fumes. That first night on the street was a masterclass in humiliation. We tried to get into a family shelter on 3rd Avenue. The line wrapped around the block. When we finally reached the front, a tired woman with a clipboard told us they were at capacity. She gave us a list of other shelters, but warned us that by 7 o'clock at night, most would be full. "Is there anywhere else?" I asked, desperation clawing at my throat. She looked at Leo, then at me. "The bus station is open 24 hours, but security is tight. You need a ticket to stay in the waiting area." We walked to the bus station. The terminal was a cavernous space filled with echoing announcements and the smell of diesel and floor wax. I bought the cheapest ticket I could find, a one-way fare to a town 30 miles away that cost $3. That left us with $1.27. The ticket bought us the right to sit on a metal bench for 4 hours until the bus departed. We did not get on the bus. We just sat. I put my arm around Leo, pulling him into my side. "Close your eyes," I said. "I will watch." He fell asleep almost instantly, his head heavy on my shoulder. I sat rigid, watching the room. I watched the security guards pacing in their yellow vests. I watched the other people who were clearly doing what we were doing, napping in short bursts, clutching their bags, terrified of being asked to move. At 2 a.m, a guard approached us. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Bus left 10 minutes ago, ma'am," he said. He was young, barely older than 20, and he looked uncomfortable. "We missed it," I lied. "We are waiting for the next one." "Next one is at 6, he said. "You cannot sleep here. You have to sit up." "We are sitting up," I said, straightening my spine until it cracked. He lingered for a second, then nodded and walked away. I let out a breath I had been holding for minutes. I looked down at Leo. He had not stirred. I realized then that I could not sleep. If I slept, we became vulnerable. If I slept, someone could take our bags. Someone could take him. So I watched the clock on the wall. I counted the seconds. I counted the tiles on the floor. I counted the cracks in my own resolve. The days that followed blurred into a gray loop of survival. We developed a routine, a grim choreography of existence. Mornings were spent at the library, or sitting in the back pews of a large Catholic church where the priest pretended not to notice we were only there for the heat. Afternoons were for finding food. We learned the geography of charity. We knew that the bakery on Pike Street threw out day-old bagels at 4 in the afternoon. We knew that the soup kitchen near the stadium served dinner at 5:30, but you had to line up by 4 to get a seat. Standing in that line for the first time was the hardest thing I had ever done. I stood sandwiched between a man who talked to invisible demons and a woman who was wrapping her feet in plastic bags. I kept my head down, terrified I would see someone I knew. I imagined my father driving by, seeing me holding a plastic tray, his vindication complete. But hunger is a powerful anesthetic for pride. When I finally sat down with a bowl of vegetable soup and a piece of stale bread, I ate with a ferocity that shocked me. I watched Leo eat, wiping a smudge of broth from his chin, and I felt a crushing wave of guilt. I had promised to take care of him. I had promised him a better life than the one he had left. Instead, I had dragged him into my own personal hell. Hygiene became a logistical nightmare. We washed in public restrooms, taking turns guarding the door. I learned to wash my underwear in the sink and dry it under the hand dryer while praying no one would walk in. I stopped wearing makeup. I stopped looking in mirrors. I became shapeless, sexless, a walking pile of layers trying to keep the cold out. But the cold was not the worst part. The worst part was the invisibility. We were walking down a busy avenue one afternoon when I saw a woman I used to know. Her name was Sarah. We had been in the same book club. She was walking out of a high-end coffee shop, holding a latte and laughing into her phone. She looked radiant, clean, and expensive. She walked right toward us. I froze. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I braced myself for the recognition, for the pity, for the shock. She looked right at me. Her eyes swept over my face, my dirty coat, my matted hair, and then they slid past. She did not see Lila Vance, the woman who had hosted wine tastings in her living room. She saw a homeless woman, an obstacle on the sidewalk to be navigated around. She stepped to the left, careful not to let her coat brush against mine, and kept walking. I stood there, paralyzed. I had ceased to exist in her world. I was a ghost. Leo squeezed my hand. I looked down. He was looking at me with a fierce, protective intensity. "She does not know," he said quietly. "She knows me." "Leo," I whispered. "We were friends." "She does not know you," he corrected. "She only knew the other you, the one with the money." He pulled my hand, urging me forward. "Come on, we have to get to the park before the bathrooms lock." His grip on my hand was constant now. It was a physical tether. When we walked, we held hands. When we sat, he leaned against me. When we slept, huddled in a doorway or on a church bench, he looped his arm through mine. It was not just affection, it was fear. We both knew the danger. We were not just homeless. We were a legal anomaly. I was not his mother. I was not his guardian. I had no papers for him. If the police stopped us, if a social worker asked the right questions, it would be over. They would take him away. They would put him in foster care, into the system that had already failed him once, and they would put me in jail for kidnapping or endangerment. This fear became a third person in our relationship. It walked beside us constantly. Every time a siren wailed, my stomach dropped. Every time a police cruiser slowed down near us, I pulled Leo closer, shielding his face with my body, trying to look invisible. One rainy Tuesday, we were seeking shelter under the awning of an office building. It was pouring, a deluge that turned the gutters into rivers. We were soaked. My boots were leaking, and my socks squished with every step. A security guard came out. "You cannot stand here," he said. "Private property." "It is raining," I said, my voice cracking. "We just need 5 minutes." "Move along," he said, his hand resting on his belt, "or I call the cops." The word cops hit me like a taser. I grabbed Leo's hand. "We are going. We are going." We stepped back out into the rain. The water was freezing. It ran down my neck, soaking my shirt. Leo was shivering violently now. His lips were turning a pale shade of blue. "I am cold, Alara," he chattered. "I know, baby, I know." I looked around frantically. The library was closed. The shelters were full. The bus station kicked us out yesterday. There was nowhere. We walked toward an underpass near the highway. It was a place I had avoided because it was crowded and dangerous. But we had no choice. We found a dry spot near a concrete pillar, far enough away from a group of men who were passing a bottle around a fire in a trash can. I sat down on the hard, gritty concrete and pulled Leo into my lap. I wrapped my coat around both of us. Creating a cocoon, I rubbed his arms, trying to generate friction, trying to transfer my body heat to him. "I am sorry," I sobbed, the tears finally mixing with the rain on my face. "I am so sorry, Leo. I failed you." He reached up and touched my cheek. His fingers were ice cold. "You did not fail," he whispered. "You are here. You stayed." I held him tighter, rocking back and forth. I was exhausted. My body felt like it was breaking down, cell by cell. My spirit was a pile of ash. I had lost my husband, my father, my home, my car, my dignity. I was huddled under a bridge, smelling of wet dog and despair, clutching a child who wasn't mine. I looked out at the curtain of rain falling beyond the concrete overhang. I realized I had reached the bottom. There was nothing left to lose because I had nothing left. Or so I thought. As the night deepened and the city noises settled into a dull roar, I stared into the darkness, listening to Leo's breathing even out. I did not know that the bottom had a trapdoor. I did not know that in the silence of this wretched night, the universe was about to play its final, most cruel joke. "Elara?" Leo mumbled, half asleep. "I am here." "I had a dream," he said, his voice slurring with exhaustion. "About what?" "About my dad." I smoothed his damp hair back from his forehead. "Go to sleep, Leo." "He was looking for me," he murmured, and then he fell silent, leaving me alone with the sound of the rain and the terrifying beating of my own heart. The night had settled over the city like a heavy, suffocating blanket. It was 3 a.m, the hour when the city stopped pretending to be alive and simply existed in a state of suspended animation. We had moved from the underpass, driven out by the smoke of a trash fire that had become too choking to bear, and found temporary refuge under the stone awning of a bank in the financial district. The irony was not lost on me. We were huddled on a slab of cold granite, trying to steal warmth from each other, while just inches behind the thick glass doors lay a vault likely holding more money than I would see in 1,000 lifetimes. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, creating long, distorted ribbons of yellow and orange that shimmered like fool's gold. I was awake, my back pressed against the rough stone wall, my eyes gritty with exhaustion but refusing to close. Sleep felt dangerous. It felt like a surrender I could not afford to make. Leo was sitting between my legs, his head resting against my chest. I had my coat wrapped around both of us, buttoned up to my chin to trap whatever body heat we generated. Usually, Leo slept with the heavy, trusting weight of a child who believes that as long as an adult is present, the monsters cannot get him. But tonight, he was rigid. I could feel the tension in his small shoulders. He was not trembling from the cold anymore. It was a different kind of vibration, like a wire pulled too tight. "Leo," I whispered, my voice raspy from dehydration. "Try to close your eyes. We have to keep moving when the sun comes up." He did not answer immediately. He was staring out at the street, watching the occasional taxi splash through the puddles. The silence stretched between us, thick and unnerving. "It smells like rain," he said finally. His voice was distant, lacking the childish cadence I was used to. "It is raining, honey," I said gently, stroking his matted hair. "No," he corrected me. "Not this rain. It smells like the rain at the estate. When it hit the slate roof, it smelled different there, cleaner." I paused, my hand freezing mid-stroke on his head. He had never spoken about an estate before. In the months we had been together, his past had been a black hole. He had deflected every question with silence or a shrug. I had assumed he came from a trailer park or a cramped apartment, a place of poverty similar to where we had ended up. "The estate?" I asked, keeping my tone light, careful not to spook him. "Was that a foster home?" He shifted slightly, pulling his knees up closer to his chest. "No, it was home. Before." "Tell me about it," I said. I thought perhaps he was delirious. Hunger does strange things to the mind. It makes you hallucinate feasts. It makes you invent castles to escape the dungeon you are in. I prepared myself to hear a fairy tale, a child's defense mechanism against the brutal reality of concrete and cold. "It was big," he said softly. So big that I could not hear my mom calling me if I was in the West Wing. The floors were marble, white marble. It was always cold on my feet in the morning. I felt a pang of pity in my chest. He was describing a movie he had seen, or perhaps a hotel he had once stayed in. "It sounds nice, Leo." "It was quiet," he continued, ignoring my comment. "Even when there were parties, the cars would come up the driveway. Long black cars. The drivers wore hats. They would open the doors for the men in suits." He turned his head slightly, looking up at me. In the dim amber light of the street lamp, his eyes looked ancient. They always called him Sir. Everyone, even the men who were on television. They would stand up when he walked into the room. They looked scared of him. My skepticism began to waver, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. The details were too specific. A child inventing a fantasy usually talks about toys, or unlimited candy, or a room made of gold. They do not talk about the deference of men in suits or the temperature of marble floors. "Who, Leo?" I asked. "Who did they call Sir?" "My father," he said. The word hung in the damp air between us. Father. He had mentioned his parents were gone before, but he had never attached a persona to them. "Your dad was a businessman?" I asked, trying to ground the conversation. "He owned things," Leo said simply. "He owned the buildings. He owned the ships. He owned the people. I think—" I shivered, and it wasn't from the wind. "People can't own other people. Leo." "He did," Leo insisted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He would sign papers, and people would move. He would make a phone call, and things would disappear. He told me once that the world is just a board game, and everyone else is just a piece he moves around." I pulled him tighter against me. This was getting dark. This was not a fantasy of wealth. It was a memory of power. And power was terrifying. "Why are you thinking about this now?" I asked. "Because of the car," he said, pointing a dirty finger toward the empty street. "A car like his went by a while ago. The engine sound? It was a V12. He only rode in V12s. I stared at him. A 7-year-old boy should not know what a V12 engine sounds like. He should know the sound of an ice cream truck or a school bus. "Leo," I said slowly, choosing my words with extreme care. "If your dad, if he had all that, why were you alone at the hospital?" Leo went silent again. He looked down at his hands, which were grime-stained and rough. He twisted a loose thread on his jacket. "I ran away," he confessed. "Why?" "Because of the woman," he said. "The new one. After my mom died, she did not like me. She told Dad I was broken. She said I was a liability." The word liability sounded unnatural coming from his mouth, like a stone dropped into a glass of water. It was an adult word, a cold, corporate word. "And your dad?" I asked, dreading the answer. "What did he say?" "He listened to her," Leo said, his voice trembling for the first time. "He always listens to the person who makes him the most money, or saves him the most money." He looked up at me again, and the intensity in his gaze pinned me to the wall. "You are not like them, Elara. You gave up everything for me. You lost your house. You sleep on the ground. You do not care about the money." "I care about you," I said fiercely. "Money is just paper." "No," Leo said, shaking his head slowly. "Money is a monster. I have seen it eat people." He leaned in closer, his lips inches from my ear, as if he was afraid the bank vault behind us might have microphones. "You think I am making it up," he whispered. "I know you do. You think I am just a hungry kid dreaming of a warm bed." "I think you have a big imagination," I admitted softly. "And that is a good thing. It helps us survive." "It is not imagination," he said. He took a deep breath, and his entire body seemed to brace itself. "My dad. He isn't just rich, Ilara. He is not like the people who lived in your neighborhood with the nice lawns." "Okay," I said, humoring him. "He was very successful." "No," Leo said. He reached into his shirt and pulled out something he wore on a piece of dirty string around his neck. I had seen the string before, but never what was attached to it. He held it out to me. It was a small, heavy ring, even in the gloom. I could tell it was platinum. It was engraved with a crest, a hawk gripping a serpent. It looked old. It looked terrifyingly expensive. "He gave me this when I was 5, Leo said. "He said it was the key to the empire." I stared at the ring. It felt heavy in my palm. Heavier than it should have been. It radiated a cold authority. "Leo," I breathed, "who is your father?" He looked me dead in the eye, and for a second, the helpless child vanished. In his place was the heir to something massive and formidable. "My dad is a billionaire," he said. He did not say it with pride. He did not say it with boasting. He said it with the same tone one might use to say, "My dad is a serial killer." He said it like it was a curse. "A billionaire," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes," he said, "and if he finds us, if he finds out I am with you, he will not say thank you." "What will he do?" I asked, a sudden chill racing down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. Leo took the ring back and tucked it under his shirt. "He destroys things that he cannot control," he whispered, "and he cannot control you." I sat there, stunned into silence. The city noises seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. I looked at the boy I had been protecting, the boy I had taught to tie his shoes, the boy I had fed with scraps of bread. I had thought I was saving a victim of poverty. I had thought I was fighting a system of indifference. But if what he said was true, and looking at the terror in his eyes, I began to believe it was I had walked unknowingly into a war zone. A billionaire. That was not just money. That was influence. That was private security teams. That was the ability to rewrite reality. I looked at the street again. The black sedan was long gone, but suddenly, every shadow looked like a threat. Every parked car looked like a surveillance post. "Leo," I whispered, my voice shaking. "Do you know his name?" Leo nodded slowly. "Do not say it," I commanded quickly, a superstitious fear seizing me. "Not here. Not now." He nodded again and leaned his head back on my chest. "I am tired, Ilara." "I know," I said. "Sleep now." He closed his eyes, and within moments, his breathing evened out, but I remained wide awake, staring into the darkness. Hope and fear were fighting a violent battle in my chest. If his father was a billionaire, he could save us. One phone call could end this nightmare. We could have warm beds, hot food, safety. But if his father was a monster, if his father was the reason Leo was on the street in the first place, then I had just become the target of a man with unlimited resources. I touched the spot on my chest where Leo's head rested. I had promised to protect him. I had burned my own life to the ground to keep that promise. But as the first gray light of dawn began to bleed into the sky, I realized with a terrifying clarity that the hardest part of our journey had not been the hunger, or the cold, or the homelessness. The hardest part was just beginning. We were no longer just surviving. We were hiding, and there is nowhere to hide when the person looking for you owns the world. The automatic doors of the Seattle Public Library slid open with a hush, admitting us into a world of regulated warmth and the smell of dust heating up on computer monitors. It was 10 in the morning. To the librarian behind the circulation desk, we were just two more vagrants seeking refuge from the persistent drizzle, indistinguishable from the other homeless patrons who shuffled in to sleep in the periodicals section. I settled Leo at a round table in the children's section with a stack of graphic novels. He looked small in the oversized chair, his legs dangling inches above the carpet. I told him to stay put, to not talk to strangers, and to read until I came back. He nodded, already losing himself in the bright colors of a superhero story, a temporary escape from our gray reality. I walked to the row of public computers. My login card was one of the few possessions I had managed to keep. I sat down, the plastic chair cold against my back, and woke the sleeping monitor. The screen flickered to life, a blinding white square in the dim room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I felt ridiculous. Part of me, the rational part that used to balance checkbooks and plan dinner parties, was screaming that this was a waste of time. Leo was a traumatized child. His story about a billionaire father was a coping mechanism, a fantasy constructed to explain away the pain of abandonment. But then I remembered the ring. I felt its phantom weight in my memory. I remembered the specific, chilling way he had described the marble floors and the men in suits. I took a deep breath and began to type. Billionaire missing son. The search engine spit back millions of results. Most of them were tabloids, conspiracy theories, and clickbait articles about celebrities. I narrowed the search. Missing heir United States. Boy missing wealthy family unsolved. I scrolled through pages of faces, smiling school photos, grainy CCTV footage, age progression sketches. None of them were Leo. I felt a mixture of relief and frustration. Relief because it meant no one was hunting us, and frustration because it meant I was chasing ghosts. I was about to log off when a thought struck me. Leo had said his father was a billionaire. He had said the car was a V12. He had mentioned a crest with a hawk and a serpent. I opened a new tab. I typed, Hawk and Serpent Family Crest Business Logo. The image search loaded slowly, line by line. Medieval coats of arms, fantasy art, sports team logos, and then, in the third row, I saw it. It was sleek, modern, stylized in silver and black, a predatory hawk clutching a writhing serpent in its talons. It looked aggressive. It looked powerful. It was the logo for Vane Enterprises. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked the image. It took me to a corporate profile on a financial news site. Vane Enterprises, a global leader in defense contracting, shipping, and real estate. CEO, Alexander Vane. I stared at the name, Alexander Vane. I highlighted the name and pasted it into the search bar. Alexander Vane family. The first result was a Wikipedia page. I clicked it. The page was long, detailing a rise to power that sounded more like a military campaign than a business career. Net worth? $12 billion. I scrolled down to the section titled Personal Life. Vane was married to Isabella Vane, who died in a skiing accident in Aspen 6 years ago. They had one son, Julian Vane. I froze. Julian. I forced myself to read the next sentence. 2 years after Isabella's death, Vane married Elena Cross, a former model and philanthropist. The couple resides in New York and maintains estates in London, Seattle, and Geneva. Seattle. They had an estate in Seattle. I opened a new tab and searched for Julian Vane missing. Nothing. No Amber Alerts, no frantic pleas from a grieving father, no police sketches. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. If Leo was Julian Vane, why was the internet not on fire with the news of his disappearance? I dug deeper. I went to the digital archives of the Seattle Times. I searched for mentions of Alexander Vane's son. I found an article from 3 years ago. It was a fluff piece about a charity gala hosted at the Vane estate. There was a photo. In the background, standing partially obscured by a potted fern, was a small boy in a tuxedo that looked uncomfortable. He was holding the hand of a tall, severe-looking woman with ice-blonde hair, presumably the stepmother, Elena. I zoomed in on the boy's face. He was younger. His cheeks were rounder. His hair was neatly combed, but the eyes were unmistakable. They were the same large, dark, intelligent eyes that had looked at me in the hospital waiting room. They were the eyes that watched me sleep in the motel. They were Leo's eyes. I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle a gasp. It was him. Leo was Julian Vane, the heir to a $12 billion empire. But why was he not reported missing? I went back to the search bar. I tried different combinations of keywords. Julian Vane boarding school. Julian Vane illness. I found a press release from 2 years ago. Vane Enterprises spokesperson confirms that Julian Vane has been enrolled in the prestigious St. Jude's Academy in Switzerland to focus on his education away from the public eye. It was a cover-up. My mind raced, connecting the dots with terrifying logic. Leo said he ran away because the new one, Elena, said he was broken. He said his father listened to her. They had not reported him missing because they did not want a scandal. Or worse, they had sent him away, perhaps to an institution, and he had escaped. And instead of looking for him, they had simply told the world he was in Switzerland. They had erased him. I looked over my shoulder at the children's section. Leo was turning a page, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked so normal, so fragile. I looked back at the screen, at the face of Alexander Vane. He was a handsome man in a terrifying way. Sharp angles, steel gray eyes, a mouth that looked like it never smiled. He looked like a man who could sign a death warrant as easily as a check. The ethical dilemma hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was harboring a billionaire's son. Technically, I was a kidnapper. If I walked into a police station right now and told them who he was, the machinery of the law would grind into motion. They would take him. They would call Alexander Vane. And then what? He would go back to the marble floors and the cold silence. He would go back to the stepmother who called him a liability. He would go back to a father who had let the world believe his son was in Switzerland while the boy was actually sleeping in alleyways. But the alternative was just as terrifying. I was a homeless woman with $4 to my name. I could not feed him. I could not clothe him. I could not protect him from the winter that was coming. If I kept him, I was sentencing him to a life of poverty and danger. If I returned him, I was returning him to a golden cage where his soul might wither and die. I looked at the date on the press release about the Swiss boarding school. It was dated 2 weeks after Leo said he ran away. They knew he was gone, and they had lied about it. This was not just a family dispute. This was a conspiracy. I felt a sudden surge of protectiveness so fierce it made my hands tremble. They did not deserve him. They had thrown him away like a broken toy. But I needed to be sure. I needed proof that Alexander Vane was actually in Seattle. If he was in New York or London, I could do nothing. But if he was here, I searched for Alexander Vane current location. A business blog post from yesterday popped up. Vane Enterprises CEO Alexander Vane arrives in Seattle for emergency shareholder meeting regarding the acquisition of Port Tech. He was here. He was in the city. I looked at the address of the Vane Enterprises headquarters. It was a glass monolith downtown, 40 stories of steel and arrogance. It was only 6 blocks from the library. I sat back in the chair, the plastic digging into my spine. I had a choice to make. I could grab Leo, run out the back door, and keep running. We could hitchhike south, maybe to California where it was warmer. We could disappear. I could be his mother, and we could live on the fringes, invisible and free. But for how long? Until he got sick again? Until the winter froze us to death? Until someone realized he did not have a birth certificate? Or I could walk into the lion's den. I could confront the man who owned the city. I looked at Leo again. He looked up, sensing my gaze. He waved a small hand at me. He trusted me. He believed I was the only person in the world who saw him. If I gave him back, I would lose him. The thought felt like someone was ripping my heart out of my chest. He was the only good thing left in my life. He was the reason I got up in the morning. But if I loved him, if I truly, selflessly loved him, I had to give him a chance at his birthright. I had to know if his father was truly the monster Leo believed him to be, or if Alexander Vane was a man who had been lied to by a wicked wife. Maybe the father didn't know. Maybe Elena had told Alexander that Julian was safe in school. Maybe Alexander Vane was sitting in his tower right now, missing his son. unaware that the boy was reading comic books 6 blocks away. I had to find out. I printed the article with the photo of Alexander Vane. I printed the logo of the hawk and serpent. I folded the papers and put them in my pocket. I logged off the computer and walked over to the children's section. "Leo," I said, keeping my voice steady, "put the book back." "Are we leaving?" he asked. "Yes." "Where are we going? To get food?" I knelt down in front of him. I took his small, dirty hands in mine. I looked into those eyes that were worth $12 billion. "We are going to go see someone," I said. "Who?" "We are going to find out if you were right," I said. "We are going to find out if the great white shark is swimming." I stood up and pulled him to his feet. I was terrified. I was nauseous with fear. But I had a plan. I wasn't going to the police. I wasn't going to a lawyer. I was going to walk Leo right through the front door of his father's building. I was going to bypass the stepmother, bypass the lies, and put the son in front of the father. And if Alexander Vane did not look at this boy with love, if I saw even a flicker of the liability Leo spoke of, then I would fight. I would scream. I would burn his reputation to the ground. "Come on, Julian," I whispered to myself, testing the name. It didn't fit. He was Leo. He was my Leo. And I was about to walk him into the belly of the beast. The Vane Enterprises tower was a monolith of black glass that seemed to drink the light from the sky. Standing at the base of it, looking up at the 40 stories that vanished into the low-hanging clouds, I felt a vertigo that had nothing to do with height. It was the crushing weight of the disparity between the world inside those doors and the world I had been living in for months. I smoothed down the front of my coat. It was stained with mud and smelled faintly of wood smoke from the fire in the underpass, but it was the best I had. I took a spit-dampened tissue and tried to wipe a smudge of dirt from Leo's cheek. He stood rigid, his hand gripping mine so tightly his knuckles were white. "Ready?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper against the wind. He didn't answer. He just nodded, a sharp, jerky motion. We pushed through the revolving doors. The silence hit us first. It was not the quiet of a library or a church. It was the pressurized, expensive silence of money. The air was cool and smelled of white tea and conditioned oxygen. The floor was a vast expanse of polished granite that reflected our ragged silhouettes like a dark mirror. Every head in the lobby turned. There were men in bespoke suits talking into earpieces, women in heels that clicked like metronomes, and security guards who looked more like paramilitary soldiers than rent-a-cops. The rhythm of the room faltered. People stopped mid-sentence. Eyes widened, then narrowed. I saw the familiar look of disgust ripple through the crowd, the collective immune system of the wealthy identifying a foreign pathogen. We walked toward the reception desk. It was a slab of marble the size of a small car. Behind it sat a woman with skin like porcelain and a headset that blinked with a soft blue light. She watched us approach with a mixture of confusion and alarm. "Security," she said softly into her headset, her eyes never leaving my face. 2 guards in dark blazers started walking toward us from the elevators. They moved with the casual, terrifying speed of predators. I reached the desk before they reached us. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, her tone implying that the only help she could offer was directions to the nearest homeless shelter. "The public restrooms are not open to non-guests." "I am here to see Alexander Vane," I said. My voice was raspy, but I forced it to be steady. The woman blinked. A small, incredulous smile touched her lips. "Mr. Vane is in a meeting, and he does not see walk-ins." The guards were 10 feet away. I could see the earpieces coiled behind their ears. I could see the bulk of tasers under their jackets. "Tell him his son is here," I said loud enough for the guards to hear. The receptionist stopped smiling. The guards slowed down, exchanging a glance. "Ma'am," the taller guard said, stepping into my personal space. "You need to leave, now." "I am not leaving," I said. I looked down at Leo. He was trembling, pressing his face into the fabric of my coat. "Show them, Leo." Leo hesitated. He looked up at the guards, then at the receptionist. He reached into his shirt and pulled out the platinum ring on the dirty string. I took it from him. I slammed it onto the marble counter. The sound was a sharp, heavy clack that echoed in the cavernous lobby. "Call him," I commanded. "Tell him we have the hawk and serpent ring. Tell him Julian is in the lobby." The receptionist looked at the ring. She did not touch it. She looked at the crest, and the color drained from her face so fast she looked like she might faint. She looked at the boy, at the grime, the long hair, the ill-fitting clothes, and then she looked at the ring again. She picked up the phone. Her hand was shaking. "Get me Mr. Vane's executive assistant," she said, her voice trembling. "Yes, immediately. It is a code 0. The guards did not touch us. They stood 3 feet away, forming a wall between us and the exit. But their aggression had evaporated, replaced by a confused tension. They stared at Leo. They were trying to see the billionaire and the beggar. We waited for 4 minutes. It felt like 4 years. Then, the elevator bank on the far wall dinged. The doors slid open, and a man in a gray suit ran out. He was not Alexander Vane. He was younger, sweating, looking terrified. He sprinted across the lobby, his shoes skidding slightly on the granite. He stopped in front of the desk, breathing hard. He looked at the ring. He looked at Leo. "Julian?" he whispered. Leo buried his face deeper into my coat. The man looked at me. "Follow me," he said. "Now." We were ushered past the security checkpoints, past the staring crowds, and into a private elevator. The man used a key card to activate it. There was only one button. Penthouse. The ascent was smooth and rapid. My ears popped. Leo did not let go of my hand. I felt sweat trickling down my back. I was terrified that I was walking into a trap, that the doors would open and there would be police waiting to arrest me. The doors slid open. We stepped into an office that was larger than the entire floor plan of the house I used to own with my husband. The walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of Seattle under the gray rain. The furniture was sparse, modern, and black. At the far end of the room, standing behind a desk that looked like a fortress, was a man. Alexander Vane was taller than he looked in the photos. He was wearing a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up and a loose tie, as if he had been working through the night. He had the kind of face that was carved from granite, hard, unyielding, and handsome in a severe way. He was looking at a tablet when we walked in. He did not look up immediately. "This better be important, Marcus," he said. "I am in the middle of the acquisition." "Sir," the man who had escorted us said, his voice cracking. "Look." Alexander Vane looked up. His eyes swept over me first. He saw a woman in dirty clothes, looking exhausted and desperate. His expression was one of cold irritation. Then his gaze shifted to the small figure clinging to my leg. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Alexander Vane dropped the tablet. It hit the glass surface of his desk with a sickening crack, but he did not blink. He walked around the desk. He moved slowly, as if he were moving underwater, or as if he were afraid that sudden movement would shatter the hallucination. He stopped 5 feet away from us. "Julian," he said. His voice was deep, but it was fractured, broken in the middle. Leo peeked out from behind my coat. He looked at the man who ruled empires. He looked at the father he had fled. "Hi, Dad," Leo whispered. Alexander Vane fell to his knees. It was a shocking loss of composure for a man who looked like he had never bent for anyone. He reached out a hand, hovering it in the air, terrified to touch the boy. "My God," Alexander breathed. "My God, Julian, is it really you?" He looked at the scar on Leo's chin, a souvenir from a fall on the playground years ago. Presumably. He looked at the eyes. The recognition was absolute. "You were in Switzerland," Alexander murmured, as if trying to reconcile two impossible realities. Elena said, "She said you were in the program. She showed me the emails." "I wasn't in Switzerland," Leo said, his voice trembling. "I was on the street." Alexander's face contorted. A mix of agony and rage washed over his features. He lunged forward, grabbing Leo by the shoulders, pulling him into a hug that looked painful in its intensity. He buried his face in Leo's dirty hair. "I am sorry," Alexander choked out. "I didn't know. I swear to you, Julian, I didn't know." For a moment, I thought it was going to be okay. I thought the reunion was pure. I felt a lump form in my throat, a mixture of relief and a sudden, sharp grief. I was losing him. This was the end of the road for us. But then, Leo did something that shattered the moment. He did not hug his father back. He stood stiffly in Alexander's arms, and then, he pulled away. He scrambled backward, slipping out of his father's grasp, and ran back to me. He grabbed my hand with both of his, pressing his body against my side, using me as a shield against his own father. Alexander remained on his knees, his arms empty. He looked at his son, who was rejecting him for a homeless woman. Then, slowly, Alexander looked up at me. The vulnerability vanished from his face, the father disappeared, and the billionaire returned. His eyes were the color of steel, and they were freezing cold. He stood up, towering over me. He looked at my dirty boots. He looked at my matted hair. He looked at the way his son was clinging to me like a lifeline. "Who are you?" he asked. The question was not a greeting. It was an interrogation. "My name is Alara," I said. "I found him." "You found him," he repeated flatly. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. I could smell his cologne, sandalwood and cold fury. "Or did you take him?" "I found him in a hospital waiting room 7 months ago," I said, holding my ground. "He was alone. I took care of him." Alexander's eyes narrowed. He looked at the way I was holding Leo's hand. He did not see affection. He saw possession. He saw leverage. 7 months, he said. "And you never went to the police? You never called the authorities?" "He was afraid," I said. "He told me he ran away because he was in danger. I protected him." "You kidnapped him," Alexander spat. "You kept a child from his father for 7 months while you lived on the street? Look at him. He is filthy. He is malnourished." "He is alive," I snapped, my own anger flaring up. "Which is more than he would be if he had stayed out there alone. I fed him before I fed myself. I slept in the rain so he could stay dry." Alexander laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "How much?" he asked. I stared at him. "Excuse me?" "Let us cut the act," Alexander said, clicking a gold pen. "You are a woman down on her luck. You saw a golden ticket. You probably figured out who he was months ago. You waited until he looked pathetic enough to maximize the payout. So, tell me, what is the price for my son?" The insult hit me harder than the cold wind of the last few months. I had given up my marriage, my home, my family, and my dignity for this boy. I had loved him when he was nothing but a nameless stray. "I do not want your money," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Everyone wants money," Alexander said, "especially people who look like you. $1 million? 2? Name the figure so I can get you out of my office and call security to disinfect the room." Leo stepped out from behind me. "Stop it," he screamed. Alexander froze, the pen hovering over the checkbook. "Do not talk to her like that," Leo yelled, his voice cracking. "She saved me. She is the only one who saved me." "Julian," Alexander said, his voice softening into a patronizing calm. "You are confused. She has been using you. This is what people like her do." "She is my family," Leo shouted. He grabbed my arm and pulled me down so he could wrap his arms around my neck. "If you make her go, I go too. I will run away again. I swear I will." Alexander looked at us, a dirty, broken woman, and a billionaire heir clinging to each other in a bond that defied all logic of his world. He looked at the checkbook in his hand, then back at me. The suspicion in his eyes did not leave. If anything, it deepened. He saw the way his son looked at me, and he hated me for it. He hated me because I had done what he had failed to do. I had been the parent. He put the checkbook away, but his expression hardened. "Marcus," he said to the assistant who was hovering by the door. "Call legal, and call the private medical team. Get them up here." He turned back to me. "You are not leaving," he said. "Not yet. We have a lot of questions to answer. And if I find out you hurt even a hair on his head, if I find out you touched him or exploited him..." He leaned in close, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "I will bury you so deep the earth will forget you ever existed." I held Leo tighter. We were inside the castle, but the walls were not there to keep us safe. They were there to keep us in. I looked at Alexander Vane, and I realized that the battle for Leo's soul had just begun. I was no longer fighting the cold or the hunger. I was fighting a man who thought he could buy reality, and I was the only thing standing in his way. The world outside the glass walls of the Vane Tower did not wait for the truth. It only waited for a headline. By the time I was escorted from Alexander's office into a sterile, windowless conference room on the 39th floor, the narrative had already been written, signed, and broadcast to millions of screens. They took my phone, but they left the television on the wall active, tuned to a 24-hour news cycle. I sat on a leather chair that cost more than my parents' car, watching my life being dismantled pixel by pixel. "The angel of the underpass or the wolf in sheep's clothing," the anchor read. Her face a mask of practiced concern. Beside her head was a split screen. On the left was Julian Vane's official portrait. Clean, smiling, innocent. On the right was a grainy photo of me taken from a security camera in the lobby, just an hour ago. I looked deranged. My hair was wild. My eyes were wide with panic, and my hand was clutching Leo's arm in a way that looked possessive rather than protective. The ticker at the bottom of the screen ran a relentless loop. Billionaire heir found living with homeless woman. Kidnapping charges pending. Police commissioner to make a statement at 5 o'clock. I wasn't a Lara Vance, the woman who had starved so a child could eat. I was a Lara Vance, the predator, the opportunist, the woman who had stolen a prince and dragged him into the mud. But the real blow came 20 minutes later. The program cut to a live interview. I saw a familiar face, and the air left my lungs. It was Mark, my ex-husband. He was sitting in a studio, wearing the navy blue suit I had bought him for our 3rd anniversary. He looked somber, the grieving victim of a chaotic woman. "Elara has always been troubled," Mark said, his voice smooth and performative. "After the miscarriage, she changed. She became obsessed with the idea of a child. She refused to accept reality. When our marriage ended, I worried she might do something desperate. I never imagined she would go this far. But looking back, the signs were there. She wanted to play mother, no matter the cost." I screamed. I stood up and screamed at the screen until my throat felt like it was bleeding. It was a lie so precise, so cruel, that it could only have been designed to destroy any credibility I had left. He was using my deepest trauma, the baby we had lost years ago, to paint me as a hysterical kidnapper. He was selling my pain to buy himself 15 minutes of fame and, presumably, a hefty appearance fee. The door opened. I spun around, expecting police. Instead, Alexander Vane walked in. He was flanked by 3 lawyers who looked like they were carved from ice. Alexander had changed his shirt. He looked composed again, the momentary lapse of emotion in the penthouse completely erased. "Turn it off," he commanded. One of the lawyers pointed a remote at the screen, and Mark's treacherous face vanished into black. "My ex-husband is a liar," I said, my voice shaking. "He is twisting everything." "It does not matter what is true, Ms. Vance," Alexander said, sitting at the head of the table. "It matters what the public believes, and right now, they believe you are a mentally unstable woman who abducted my son." "I saved him!" I slammed my hands on the table. "He ran away because he was terrified. Ask him, where is he?" "Julian is with the medical team," Alexander said coolly. "He is being evaluated for malnutrition, exposure, and psychological trauma. He is confused. He thinks he loves you. But that is just Stockholm Syndrome. You made him dependent on you for survival." One of the lawyers slid a thick document across the table. This is a non-disclosure agreement, the lawyer said, and a confession of guilt for custodial interference. If you sign it, Mr. Vane is prepared to drop the kidnapping charges. We will frame it as a misunderstanding. You will receive a settlement of $50,000 to help you get back on your feet, on the condition that you leave Seattle and never contact Julian Vane again. And if I do not sign? I asked. Then we proceed with the felony charges, the lawyer said without blinking. You will go to prison for 20 years, and while you are rotting in a cell, Mark will likely sue you for defamation if you try to speak out. You will die in jail. Ms. Vance. I looked at the paper. It was my exit ticket. I could walk away. I could escape the crushing weight of the Vane empire. I could take the money, move to a small town, and try to forget the boy with the dark eyes who used to draw pictures of sharks while I slept. But then I remembered Leo's voice in the dark. If you make her go, I go too. I want to see him, I said. That is not possible, Alexander said. I am not signing anything until I see him, I insisted. I need to know he is safe. I need to know he is not with her. Alexander's brow furrowed. Her? Elena, I said. The woman he ran away from. The woman who called him a liability. Alexander sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. My wife loves Julian. She has been distraught since he went missing. She is flying in from New York as we speak. You are trying to drive a wedge between my family to save your own skin, and it is pathetic. She lied to you, I cried out. She told you he was in Switzerland. How can you trust her? Because she showed me the acceptance letters, Alexander roared, slamming his fist on the table. She showed me the emails from the headmaster giving us updates on his progress. The deception was likely orchestrated by someone else, or Julian never made it to the school and the school covered it up. But my wife is not the villain here. You are. The door opened again. The timing was almost theatrical. A woman walked in. She was tall, impossibly thin, and dressed in a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than the motel I had been kicked out of. Her hair was a pale, icy blonde, pulled back into a severe chignon. It was Elena Vane. She stopped in the doorway, her blue eyes sweeping over the room. When they landed on me, I saw it. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was a cold, reptilian assessment. She was looking at a bug she needed to squash. Alexander, she said, her voice like wind chimes made of glass. Is this the woman? Yes, Alexander said, his posture softening as he looked at his wife. Elena, you should not be in here. The lawyers are handling it. I needed to see her, Elena said. She walked over to the table. Ignoring the lawyers, she stood right in front of me, up close. She smelled of expensive lilies and something chemical. You have caused my family a great deal of pain. I kept him alive, I said, meeting her gaze, after you threw him away. Elena's eyes flickered. Just for a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. You are delusional. I have spent every day of the last 7 months weeping for my stepson. Where is he? Alexander asked, looking at Elena. Is he settled in the medical wing? He is sleeping, Elena said, turning her back on me to face her husband. I sat with him until he drifted off. He is so thin. Alexander, it breaks my heart. Did he say anything? Alexander asked. About why he left? He was rambling, Elena said quickly. He is delirious. He kept talking about sharks and nonsense. Ideally, we should get him to the Swiss clinic as soon as he is medically stable. They have the best trauma specialists. I froze. No, I whispered. They both looked at me. You cannot send him back, I said, my mind racing. That is where you said he was. Switzerland. It is the best facility in the world, Elena said coldly. Wait, I said. A puzzle piece clicked into place in my mind. It was a small detail, something Alexander had said moments ago. You said she showed you emails from the headmaster, updates on his progress. Yes, Alexander said impatiently. Weekly reports. But he was not there, I said, my voice gaining strength. He was with me. So if the school was sending updates on a student who was not there, Then the school is lying. Exactly, Alexander said, which is why I will be suing the academy into oblivion. Or, I said, looking directly at Elena, the emails did not come from the school. Elena stiffened. It was subtle, just a tightening of the muscles in her neck, but I saw it. If he never arrived at the school, I continued, the school would have called. They would have reported a missing student on day one. A billion-dollar heir does not just not show up without alarms going off, unless… I stood up. The lawyers tensed. But I didn't care. Unless he was never enrolled, I said. Unless the school never knew he was coming, which means the emails you received, Alexander, the weekly reports about his grades and his behavior, they were fakes. Who had access to your inbox? Who managed the communication with the school? This is ridiculous, Elena snapped. Alexander, get her out of here. I managed the enrollment, Elena said, her voice rising an octave. I handled the logistics because you were busy with the merger. You entrusted it to me. Right, I said. So if the emails were fake, you either were too incompetent to notice, or you wrote them yourself. Alexander looked at his wife. He was a brilliant businessman. He understood logic. He understood paper trails, and he saw the logic forming a noose. Elena, Alexander said slowly, did the school ever call you? Of course they didn't, Elena said, her composure cracking. I told you, they are complicit. They must have been covering their tracks. Or, I said, pushing the advantage, Leo never got on the plane. Did you take him to the airport, Elena, or did you hire a car? I hired a service, Elena stammered. Which service? Alexander asked. His voice had dropped to that terrifyingly low register again. I do not remember the name, Elena cried. It was 7 months ago. Why are you interrogating me? I am your wife. This woman is a criminal. I am a woman who knows what a lie sounds like, I said. And I know that Leo is terrified of you. He called you the new one. He said you told his father he was broken. He is broken, Elena shouted, and then immediately clamped her hand over her mouth. The silence that followed was deafening. Alexander stood up. He walked over to his wife. He looked down at her with a mixture of horror and dawning realization. You said he was broken, Alexander repeated. You used that word. In our bedroom. You said, Julian is broken after his mother died. He needs to go away to be fixed. Elena turned pale. I meant he was grieving. Alexander, you are twisting my words. I want to see the emails, Alexander said. Now, open your phone. No, Elena said, stepping back. This is insane. I will not be treated like a suspect in front of this beggar. Open the phone, Elena, Alexander roared. Sir, one of the lawyers interrupted, holding his own phone. Security in the medical wing just radioed. There is a problem. Alexander spun around. What problem? It is Julian, sir, the lawyer said. He is gone. My heart stopped. What do you mean gone? I screamed. The window in the recovery room is broken, the lawyer said, and the fire escape alarm has been triggered. He has fled the building. Alexander looked at me. I looked at him. He is running, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He saw her. He saw Elena come in. He knew she was here. He is back on the street, Alexander whispered, his face turning gray. And this time, I said, grabbing my coat, he knows he can't trust you. He is going to hide where you will never find him. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't wait for the lawyers. I ran for the door. Wait, Alexander shouted. I turned back. You know where he would go, Alexander said. It wasn't a question. It was a plea. Maybe, I said, but if I find him, I am not bringing him back to you. Not until you clean the rot out of your own house. I pointed at Elena, who was standing against the wall, looking like a cornered animal. Ask her what she paid the driver to do with him 7 months ago. I spat. Because billionaires' sons do not just get lost on the way to the airport. I turned and sprinted into the hallway, leaving the billionaire and his wife to drown in the truth. while I ran back into the cold, dark city to find the boy who was the only family I had left. I did not have to guess where he went. There was only one place in this city where the noise of the traffic faded into a dull hum, a place where we had spent countless hours watching the ferries cut through the gray water of the Puget Sound. It was a small, covered maintenance alcove behind the public library's ventilation system. It was warm because of the exhaust vents, and it was hidden. I ran until my lungs burned. The rain was coming down in sheets now, washing away the grime of the city, but unable to wash away the sickness in my gut. I scrambled up the metal fire escape, my boots slipping on the wet grate. When I reached the top, I saw him. He was curled into a ball against the brick wall, his knees pulled up to his chin, shivering violently. He looked smaller than ever, a tiny speck of humanity against the backdrop of the towering skyscrapers. "Leo!" I choked out, collapsing to my knees beside him. He flinched, covering his head with his arms as if expecting a blow. "Go away!" he screamed. "She is here! The new one is here!" "I know," I said, pulling his wet hands away from his face. "I know she is here, but I am here too, and I am not going to let her take you." He looked at me, his eyes wide and terrified. "She lied," he sobbed. "She told Dad I was broken. She told him to send me away. But she didn't send me to school. Ilara, she paid the man to take me. She paid the man to leave me." I pulled him into my arms, rocking him back and forth. The heat from the vent blew over us, smelling of dust and old paper. "I know, baby. I know." "He drove for a long time," Leo whispered into my shoulder, his voice trembling with the memory he had suppressed for 7 months. "He drove a black car, not a nice car like Dad's. It smelled like peppermint, and he was angry. He was yelling on the phone the whole time." My blood ran cold. Peppermint, Mark, my ex-husband, had an addiction to peppermint gum. He chewed it incessantly to mask the smell of the cigarettes he swore he had quit. "What was he yelling about, Leo?" I asked, a terrible dread pooling in my stomach. "He was yelling at his wife," Leo said. "He was saying he needed the money. He said, "Shut up, Ilara, I am handling it." The world stopped. The sound of the rain, the hum of the vents, the beating of my own heart, it all vanished into a vacuum of pure horror. "Shut up, Ilara." I remembered that day. It was 7 months ago, a Tuesday. Mark had called me, furious because I had asked about our dwindling savings account. He had told me he had a high-profile job that would fix everything. He had told me not to wait up for dinner. I pulled back to look at Leo's face. "Leo," I whispered, my voice shaking so hard I could barely form the words. "The man, did he have a scar? On his hand?" Leo nodded, tears streaming down his dirty face. "Yes, a white line, right here." He traced a line across the back of his left hand. Mark had cut his hand on a broken wine glass 2 years ago. It had left a jagged, white scar across his knuckles. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from vomiting. It wasn't just a stranger. It wasn't just a faceless mercenary Elena had hired. It was Mark, my husband, the man I had shared a bed with, the man who had sat across from me at the dinner table that night, smelling of peppermint and rain, and told me he had had a long drive. He had taken Julian Vane. He had taken a 7-year-old boy, driven him to the chaotic heart of the city, and pushed him out of the car. He had abandoned a child to die so he could pay off his gambling debts. And then he had come home to me, kissed me on the forehead, and slept soundly. And when I found the boy, when I brought Leo home, Mark hadn't just been angry. He had been terrified. He had recognized the boy. That was why he forced the divorce. That was why he demanded I choose. He wasn't jealous. He was destroying the evidence. "Oh my God," I wailed, a sound of pure animal anguish. "Oh my God." I was sick with guilt. I felt dirty. I had lived with the monster who did this. I had cooked his meals. I had washed the clothes he wore while he committed this atrocity. "Ilara?" Leo asked, scared by my reaction. "What is wrong?" Before I could answer, The heavy metal door to the roof banged open. Alexander Vane stepped out into the rain. He was not alone. 2 security guards flanked him, but he waved them back. He walked toward us, his expensive suit soaking through in seconds. He looked like a man walking to his own execution. He stopped 5 feet away. He looked at his son, shivering in my arms. Then he looked at me. He saw the horror on my face. "The police are downstairs," Alexander said, his voice flat and dead. "They have Elena," she cracked. She gave them the name of the man she hired. He took a step closer, the rain dripping from his nose. "She hired a lawyer, a man named Mark Vance." I closed my eyes. Hearing him say the name made it real. It made it permanent. "I didn't know," I whispered. "Alexander, I swear to God, I didn't know." "I know," Alexander said. "We pulled the phone records. We have the audio from the car's dash cam. Elena was thorough with her blackmail material. We heard him talking to you. We heard him lying to you." He looked down at Leo. His expression crumbled. The billionaire, the titan of industry, looked utterly broken. "I paid for it," Alexander said, his voice cracking. "Not directly, but I gave her the money. I gave her the power. I was so busy building my empire that I let a wolf into the nursery. I let her convince me my own son was damaged goods." He fell to his knees on the wet gravel, mirroring my position. He didn't try to touch Leo this time. He just bowed his head. "I am the one who abandoned you, Julian." Alexander said to the ground, "She gave the order, but I signed the checks. I looked away. I am so sorry." Leo looked at his father. He looked at the man who was crying in the rain. "Why did you believe her?" Leo asked. It was a simple question, but it carried the weight of 1,000 nights spent sleeping on concrete. "Because I was weak," Alexander said, looking up. "Because after your mother died, I was afraid of you. You looked so much like her. It hurt to look at you, so I let Elena handle you. I thought I was protecting you from my grief, but I was just protecting myself." It was a confession that stripped him of all his power. He wasn't a billionaire in that moment. He was just a father who had failed in the most fundamental way possible. Leo slowly disentangled himself from my arms. He stood up. He walked over to his father. He didn't hug him. He just reached out and placed a small hand on Alexander's wet shoulder. "You are wet," Leo said. Alexander let out a sob that sounded like something tearing inside his chest. He reached up and covered Leo's hand with his own. "I deserve to be—" "Ilara saved me," Leo said firmly. "Mark was bad, but Ilara is good. You cannot be mad at her." Alexander looked at me. The hatred and suspicion were gone from his eyes, replaced by a haunted, hollow look. "My security team picked up your ex-husband 10 minutes ago," Alexander said to me. "He was trying to board a flight to Cabo. He had $50,000 in cash in his carry-on. The second half of the payment from Elena." I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost blinded me. Mark had sold a child for the price of a luxury car. "I want to see him," I said. "I want to look him in the eye when they put the handcuffs on him." "You will," Alexander promised. "I will make sure of it." He stood up, looking weary and old. "Come back inside. Ilara, please. Julian needs a doctor. Real doctors this time. And you need to be dry." We walked back to the tower in silence. This time, we didn't go through the lobby. We went through the service entrance, shielded from the cameras. The next hour was a blur of activity. Leo was whisked away by a team of pediatric specialists, but this time, Alexander refused to let him out of his sight. He stood by the door of the medical suite, watching every move the doctors made. I was taken to a private room. I was given dry clothes, expensive, soft clothes that felt foreign on my skin. I was given hot tea, but I couldn't stop shivering. A lawyer entered the room, not the one from before. This one looked kind, but serious. "Ms. Vance," she said, "the police need your statement. But before that, Mr. Vane asked me to present you with a choice." "I do not want his money," I said automatically. "It is not about money," she said. She sat down and placed a file on the table. Mark Vance and Elena Vane are going to prison for a very long time. The charges are kidnapping, conspiracy, child endangerment, and fraud. But the trial will be brutal. The defense will try to drag you through the mud. They will argue that you were complicit, that you and Mark planned this together to extort the Vane family. That is a lie, I said. It is, she agreed. But it is a lie they will tell. Mr. Vane wants to offer you a way out. He can fly you to Europe tonight. He can set you up with a new identity, a new life. You can disappear. You will never have to see Mark's face again. You will never have to testify. And Leo? I asked. What happens to Leo? Julian will remain with his father, she said. Mr. Vane is stepping down as CEO to focus on his son's recovery. No, I said. The lawyer blinked. Excuse me? If I leave, who tells Leo's side of the story? I asked. Who tells the jury that he was brave? Who tells them that he drew sharks to keep from crying? If I leave, Mark gets to tell the story. Mark gets to say I was crazy. Elena gets to say she was a victim. I stood up, walking to the window. I looked out at the city that had tried to kill us. I am not going anywhere, I said. I am going to testify. I am going to sit on that stand, and I am going to point my finger at Mark Vance, and I am going to tell the world exactly what he did. I am going to make sure he never hurts another child again. It will destroy your reputation, the lawyer warned. The tabloids will never believe you were innocent. You will always be the kidnapper's wife. I do not care about my reputation, I said. I lost that when I walked out of my parents' house in the rain. I care about the truth. The door opened. Alexander was standing there. He had heard. He is asking for you, Alexander said quietly. He won't sleep unless you are in the room. I looked at the billionaire. He looked humble. He looked grateful. I am staying, I told him. I know, Alexander said. Thank you. I walked past him, down the hall to the medical suite. Leo was lying in a bed that looked too big for him, hooked up to monitors that beeped with a steady, reassuring rhythm. He looked clean. He looked warm. When he saw me, his face lit up. You stayed, he whispered. I will always stay, I said, pulling a chair up to his bedside. I took his hand. It was warm. The dirt was gone. But the bond was there, stronger than steel, stronger than money. Outside, the storm was finally breaking. The sirens were wailing in the distance, coming for Mark, coming for Elena. Justice was a machine that was finally grinding into gear. But in this quiet room, there was only peace. I had lost everything to get here. My husband was a monster. My family had disowned me. My name was mud. But as I watched the boy sleep, I knew I had won the only thing that mattered. I had saved him, and in the end, he had saved me right back. The gavel hit the mahogany sound block with a noise that sounded less like a legal procedure and more like a thunderclap ending a long, violent storm. It was exactly 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, 6 months after I had walked Leo out of the Vane Tower. The Superior Court of Seattle was packed. The gallery was a sea of reporters, sketch artists, and curious onlookers who had been following the Billionaire boy case with obsessive interest. But I did not look at them. I kept my eyes fixed on the two defendants sitting at the table to my left. Mark wore a gray suit that was visibly too large for him. He had lost weight in county jail. His face, once so arrogant and smooth, was gaunt and covered in a patchy stubble. He would not look at me. He stared at his hands, the hands that had steered a steering wheel while a 7-year-old boy cried in the back seat. Elena Vane sat beside him. She was perfectly groomed, her hair an immaculate helmet of blonde, but her eyes were glass. She looked like a mannequin that had been toppled over. She had spent the last half-year trying to blame Mark, claiming he had blackmailed her, but the audio recordings from Mark's car had destroyed her defense. We all heard her voice. We all heard her order the disposal of her stepson as if he were a bag of trash. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, adjusted her robes and looked down at the paperwork. In the matter of the state versus Mark Vance and Elena Vane, on the charges of kidnapping in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and child endangerment. The jury finds the defendants guilty on all counts. A gasp rippled through the room. Mark put his head on the table and began to sob. It was a wet, pathetic sound. Elena simply closed her eyes. The judge continued. She sentenced Mark to 25 years in a maximum security prison without the possibility of parole. She sentenced Elena to 30 years, citing her role as the mastermind and her position of trust as a guardian. As the bailiffs moved in to handcuff them, Mark finally turned to look at me. His eyes were wide with panic. He mouthed something. Perhaps I am sorry or help me, but I did not care. The man I had married, the man I had grieved for during our divorce, was dead. This was just a stranger going to a cage where he belonged. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned to see Alexander Vane. He looked different than the man I had met in the tower. The sharp, terrifying edges of the billionaire tycoon had softened. He wore a simple navy suit, and the lines around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent by a bedside, not a boardroom table. "It is over, Elara," he said softly. I nodded, letting out a breath I felt like I had been holding for half a year. "It is over." We walked out of the courtroom together, not through the front doors where the paparazzi were waiting like sharks, but through a private back exit Alexander's security team had secured. A black SUV was waiting. Inside, sitting with a coloring book and a tablet, was Julian. He looked healthy. His cheeks were full. His hair was cut in a neat, trendy style, and he was wearing a bright red sweater. He looked like a normal, happy 8-year-old boy, but when the door opened and he saw me, he dropped the tablet. "Elara." He scrambled across the leather seat. I climbed in, and he buried his face in my chest. He smelled of expensive shampoo and childhood, no longer of rain and fear. "Did they go to the bad place?" he asked, looking up at me. "Yes, Leo," I said, using the name only we shared. "They went to the bad place. They can never hurt you again." Alexander climbed in and sat opposite us. He watched his son clinging to me, but there was no jealousy in his eyes today, only gratitude. We drove to a quiet park overlooking the city. It was a neutral ground, a place where the air felt fresh. We sat on a bench, watching Julian run toward the swings. He pumped his legs, flying higher and higher, laughing as he reached for the sky. Alexander turned to me. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. "I told you I wanted to repay you," he said. "I know you refused the money before, but please, this is a check for $5 million. It is not a payoff. It is a thank you. You can start over. You can buy a house. You can travel. You can do whatever you want." I looked at the envelope. $5 million. It was enough to buy my parents' respect back. It was enough to buy a house on the hill and look down on the people who had ignored me. It was freedom, in the way the world defined freedom. I took the envelope. I held it for a moment, feeling the weight of the paper. Then I handed it back. "I cannot take it, Alexander." He looked stunned. "Elara, be reasonable. You have nothing. You are living in a temporary apartment. You need this." "If I take this money," I said, looking him in the eye, "then everyone was right. Mark was right. The tabloids were right. It makes our relationship transactional. It makes what I did for Leo a job." I did not save him because I wanted to be rich. I continued. I saved him because he was a human being who was cold and alone. If I take the money, I sell that act of love, and I need to keep that. It is the only thing I have left that is truly mine. Alexander stared at me for a long time. Then, slowly, he put the envelope back in his pocket. "You are a baffling woman, Lila Vance," he said, "but I think you might be the most honorable person I have ever met." "I do not want your money," I said, "but I want one thing." "Name it," he said. "Anything." "I want you to be the father he thinks you are." I said, "I want you to leave the office at 5 o'clock. I want you to go to his soccer games. I want you to listen to him when he talks about sharks, because if you send him away to another boarding school, or if you let another nanny raise him, I will come back, and next time, I won't be as nice. Alexander smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. I resigned as CEO yesterday, he said. I am staying on as chairman. But my days of 80-hour work weeks are done. We are moving to a smaller house in the country, just the two of us, and a dog. Apparently, Julian insists on a dog. I smiled back. He needs a dog. Julian ran back to us, breathless and flushed. He looked at his father, then at me. Are you coming with us, Alara? He asked. Dad says we have a guest room. You could live there. I looked at the boy who had been my entire world. I loved him enough to die for him, but I also loved him enough to know that he needed to heal with his father. He needed to rebuild the foundation that had been broken, and I needed to rebuild myself, not as a guardian, not as a victim, but as a woman who had survived the fire. No, sweetie, I said, brushing the hair from his forehead. I have to go find my own home now. His face fell. But I will never see you? I pulled him close. You will see me whenever you want. Your dad has my number. We will have lunch every Sunday. I promise. But you have a job to do. You have to teach your dad how to be a kid again. Julian looked at Alexander, who nodded solemnly. I have a lot to learn. Julian. I stood up. The wind was blowing off the water, but it felt warm. I was wearing a simple coat I had bought from a thrift store, and I had exactly $400 in my bank account from a temp job I had started last week. I had no husband. I had no inheritance. I had no mansion. But as I walked away from the park, leaving the billionaire and his son to start their new life, I felt lighter than air. I had walked through the valley of the shadow of death. I had faced the monsters of greed and indifference, and I had won. I had proven that family is not about blood or DNA or last names. Family is the people who spot you in the waiting room when you are invisible. Family is the people who hold your hand when the rain is cold. Family is the choice to stay when everyone else leaves. I reached the sidewalk and turned back one last time. Julian was back on the swings, and Alexander was pushing him. I heard their laughter carried on the wind. I turned the corner and walked into the rest of my life. I was Lila Vance. I had lost everything, and in doing so, I had found the only thing that mattered, my own soul, and that was a fortune no billionaire could ever buy. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Alara's journey. If you enjoyed this tale of justice and redemption, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.